I am an autism and employment success story. And over the years, I became more passionate about autism advocacy, and there's a reason for this. I did a few conferences, I did things like that, but nothing in the scale of what I do now. And the reason I'm so passionate is a young man who I will call Adam. So I met Adam when I was in the psychiatric ward for my mental illness. And Adam was a young man, he was 21 and he was autistic. And when I told him that I was autistic and I'd written a book and worked in the public service, he said, "That's not true, you're lying, that's not possible." And for him, it wasn't possible because all he'd been told was what he couldn't do. And he was so limited by other people's negative expectations that he'd spent the past 6 years sitting in his room playing computer games and not engaging with anything. And he was miserable.
I am so honored and excited to have Yenn Purkis, and correct me if I didn't say your name right, on Mother's Guide Through Autism podcast today.
Thank you
All
for having
right.
me.
Yay. I would like to begin with your personal story of your autism diagnosis, living with autism, and how you became a successful author, advocate, public speaker, and community leader.
Thank you. And so I don't know that we have enough time to go through that whole life story, so I better make it brief. So I was diagnosed in 1994. I was one of the first adults in Australia diagnosed with what was then called Asperger Syndrome. I didn't understand what it meant. The thing about not being diagnosed until you're an adult is that school was particularly difficult. So I was quite academic. I did very well in the schoolwork, but actually I was really hated and bullied a lot. And I absolutely detested going to school. I hated it with a passion. It didn't occur to me not to. A lot of kids now do school refusal. If that was given as an option, I would have been doing that, but it wasn't. You know, you had to go to school. That was the rules. And I was a very rules-focused person when I was younger. I got into a lot of trouble as a young adult, trouble with the law, that kind of thing. I got involved with some people that were very damaging and very negative and doing some really bad stuff. And I got involved in that. So my life became extremely difficult. I developed a mental illness when I was 21 due to self-medicating drugs and things like that. So I still have that illness now. It's called schizoaffective disorder. So it's like it's almost like a cross between schizophrenia and bipolar. So it's like a mood element and a thinking element and things like that. It's not pleasant. So my early years were very difficult. When I was 25, I wanted to change. I decided that my life was chaotic and negative and doing bad things in the world. And so I set about changing my world. I was quite a masker. So autistic people often do the thing where they mask in order to fit in and to be accepted socially. And I definitely did that. And I got to a point where I didn't know who I was. I'd masked so much, I'd lost track of my actual character, and I didn't know what kind of person I was, what I liked, what I didn't like, what I valued, what I cared about, what I thought was bad, what I thought was good. And so I modeled myself on the people that I thought were decent. And I started thinking, I want to put things in the world that make it better, not worse. And when I leave the earth, I want to leave it in a better way than it was when I was, here. I went to university and got a degree. I actually got 3 degrees. I've got a master's degree in visual art because I loved painting. I still love painting, and that seemed to be the thing to do. When I was in my last year of university, I met someone called Polly Samuel, who was an amazing autistic advocate. Sadly, she passed away a few years ago, but she became my mentor. And I'd never accepted my autism. I always thought autism was a bad thing. I thought it didn't apply to me. It was very raw, it was very personal, and I didn't want to be autistic. I felt that if I accepted my autism, I'd be validating what the bullies at school said and all their insults to me. And I thought it was a diagnosis of nerd, and I wasn't a nerd, and I didn't want it. So when I met Polly, my feelings about my autism were changing and I accepted it, but I didn't know much about it. So getting friendly with Polly helped me to understand what autism actually was and about my identity as an autistic person and all of those things. And Polly encouraged me to write my life story. And the way she put it was, often I go and give talks to rooms full of parents, and there's always a couple up the back and they leave before the end. They leave when the questions are on, they don't stay for the cup of tea. And those are the parents of the kids, the autistic kids who get in trouble with the police. If you wrote your story, those parents would be the audience. That would be what your story would be for. And it didn't take me long to realise that was my own parents. And so I wrote the book. It took me 4 weeks to write my life story. 4 weeks to write it, 2 weeks to edit it, and 3 weeks for the publisher to write back and say, yes, we want to publish this. And this was absolutely life-changing, pivotal moment. This was the biggest accomplishment I had ever had in my entire life, a book being published. Now, I come from a very creative family. We have a lot of authors, we have a lot of musicians, we have a lot of artists. So it wasn't that unusual to write a book in my family, but it was amazing and it really changed my life. And 3 months after the book came out, I applied for graduate jobs in the Australian Public Service, so civil servant jobs. Now, I knew that I had a criminal history and I knew that there was a good chance I wouldn't get those jobs because of my criminal history. But I also knew from the job description that I could do the jobs and that I'd actually really enjoy them. And I thought, if I don't apply and I would have got it, I will have lost a lot. If I do apply and I don't get it, I've lost nothing. So there's nothing to lose. So apply for your jobs. And so I applied for 2 graduate jobs, which I now know is ridiculous. Most people apply for 20 and they're lucky if they get an interview. I was shortlisted for one and successful in the other. So 14 years ago, I joined the Australian Public Service as a graduate, and I've been in the Australian Public Service ever since. I am an autism and employment success story. And over the years, I became more passionate about autism advocacy, and there's a reason for this. I did a few conferences, I did things like that, but nothing at the scale of what I do now. And the reason I'm so passionate is a young man who I will call Adam. So I met Adam when I was in the psychiatric ward for my mental illness. And Adam was a young man, he was 21 and he was autistic. And when I told him that I was autistic and I'd written a book and worked in the public service, he said, that's not true, you're lying, that's not possible. And for him, it wasn't possible because all he'd been told was what he couldn't do. And he was so limited by other people's negative expectations that he'd spent the past 6 years sitting in his room playing computer games and not engaging with anything. And he was miserable. His lack of any confidence in what he could do horrified me. And I just thought, I always thought that an early diagnosis was a good thing. But for this young man, it wasn't, because it just came with a whole bunch of deficits thinking and negativity. And the poor guy had no confidence in himself. He had no understanding that he had anything to offer the world. And I just thought, this isn't right. I need to do something about this. So I figured employment was a pivotal point for autistic people. So I wrote a book for autistic teens called The Wonderful World of Work, and that was published. And shortly after that got accepted for publication, I got asked to give a TED talk. So those 2 things made my career go in interesting directions. And so after the employment book and the TED talk, I wrote a book or co-wrote a book on mental health and autism. And then I wrote 2 books on resilience with Emma Goodall, who's a fantastic advocate. So they're for parents of autistic kids at different ages. And then I wrote, what else did I write after that? I wrote a book called Women on the Spectrum with Emma as well, with Emma Goodall. And then I wrote a book called The Awesome Autistic Go-To Guide, which is for kids on the spectrum, and it's all about positive self-knowledge. So when I met Adam and he was so negative and had no confidence in himself, the Awesome Autistic Go-To Guide is for kids to address that and to give them a positive sense of who they are and good self-knowledge and all of that. And then I've got one that's just come out recently called the Autistic Trans Guide to Life, which is for autistic and transgender adults. I've got one for transgender and autistic kids, which I'm writing at the moment, and I've got one on advocacy, which it's in production with the publisher. So those are all my books. I have a number of chapters. I give talks every week. At the moment, I'm very sought after, so I'm having to say no to a few things, which doesn't come easily to me. I like to say yes. And I'm one of the most visible autistic advocates in the world, which is lovely. And I guess I'm living proof of what people can achieve with a bit of motivation and determination and passion. And autistic passions, our special interests, our passionate interests, absolutely change the world. You look at Greta Thunberg and her passion for climate activism, that's somebody who is changing the world. And I think that's really important, to have that view of autistic people, not just of the challenges, but of the great strengths we bring. So I guess that's my little potted life story.
Well, first of all, thank you for saying yes to this podcast with your busy schedule, because I just feel so honored. As I said earlier, I would say that this work that you're doing is life-changing, because it really does help bring the gap together, right? And bring us all together, because as a parent, it can be difficult to know when to back off, when to push, how to motivate, how to speak, how to really connect. And it has taken me a long while to be able to do that with my son. So what you're sharing with us today is like a treasure chest. So thank you for all the beautiful work you're doing. I would like to know, what have been some of the biggest challenges and triumph that you've experienced as a person with autism?
So challenges. When I was younger, I had huge issues with bullying. I was very unpopular at school and I was treated very poorly. And sadly, even now, when we have diagnoses available and support available, bullying is still a huge issue for autistic people, especially kids. I think there's recent research showed over 80% of autistic school kids are bullied. I mean, that's not ever okay. And for me, it was very bad for my self-esteem. It was very bad for my sense of who I was. And yeah, it stayed with me for many, many, many years after it finished. Being unable to work. So I spent about 10 years unable to work. And that was very difficult for me. I'm very lucky. I'm one of a very tiny minority of autistic people that are good at job interviews. Most autistic people are not. But for me, it's something that I've managed to do myself quite well. But anxiety has been a big barrier to employment for me. And once again, I think for a lot of autistic people, anxiety is a huge problem, and not having strategies to address that and getting overwhelmed by it. And mental health issues has been a huge challenge for me and still is. I know I've, literally written the book on autism and mental health, but it's very hard to apply the strategies yourself. So, I do my best, but it is quite challenging. And some of my strengths, I mean, my autistic passion is writing. I've never been taught how to write. The only training I've had in writing is high school English. And I've written 9 published books with 2 more on the way. My writing abilities are off the scale and it's lovely and I really love it, and it's one of my autistic passions, but it's also one of my prodigious skills, and that's fantastic. My public service job, that's a great strength and triumph. It gives me financial security, which is fantastic. I really enjoy it. I've always enjoyed it. Work is my happy place. I was in a mental health service recently, and they had a meeting every morning, and they'd ask you what your pleasure goal was. And I always said, I don't do fun, I work. I'm defined by the fact that I work. And it's true. My social connectedness within the autistic community, there's this thing that autistic people sometimes say, which is find your tribe, which means find your neurodivergent peer group and find other people who experience the world in a similar way to you. And so my tribe is very important to me. I absolutely love being around other autistic people and that kind of thing. And my profile, I'm a very gentle person as a community leader. I don't go around saying, "Ooh, look at me, I'm wonderful." But I'm very supported with my profile in the autistic community from other people, and then I support other people myself. So that online community I find really lovely. I know for some people it's very difficult, the online autistic community, and it's seen as quite negative, but I don't find that myself. I really enjoy being part of the community.
I think that's lovely, and I think it is so important to have your tribe and to have other people in your life that you feel really at home with. I know that one of the beautiful books that you've written is about resilience.
Mm.
How do we, as parents, help our preteens or teenagers, young adults on the spectrum build the resilience, and why is that important?
Resilience is extremely important. It's a key skill for living, particularly in this day and age when there's a lot of triggering things out there, particularly online. It is an essential skill for everyone, but particularly for autistic people, because we have a number of barriers to participation in the world that other people don't. So those high levels of anxiety, the way we can be criticised, the negative views and deficits thinking we're subjected to, all of those things, and some of the stresses around being autistic and some of the difficulties that can come with it, make resilience particularly important for this group. And the other issue is that it can be harder to build resilience for autistic people for those same reasons. So it's something that's important to have but difficult to attain. So that makes it a focus to my mind. I see, and in the book, Emma and I gave 3 elements of building resilience. One was the place of safety. Now, the place of safety is, for example, a family environment where there's love and respect and care, and that's really clear, and that child is brought up not in a critical environment, not an environment where they're being told they're doing the wrong thing and being punished for stuff that might not necessarily need to be punished, but actually an environment where they feel safe, they feel supported, they can be who they are, they can be their authentic self. So that means if you come from that perspective, when difficult things happen, you've already got that barrier to help address those difficult things. The other element is controlled challenges. So this is like the engine room of resilience. Controlled challenges is taking on incrementally more difficult things in order to build mastery and capability on a topic. So you might, for me, getting into the workplace, so I couldn't work. I had a job in 2001 and I got so anxious that it made me psychotic and I had to quit the job and didn't work again for some time. I didn't think I will never work again. And what I did was build in incrementally more challenging work situations. So I got a volunteer job that was less stressful because I wasn't being paid. So I wasn't going to ruin the workplace, which is my worry. Then I got a small business, which was another step up incrementally, and that went well. And then I got a job giving talks about autism, and that was okay. So all of those things, those incremental challenges, made it possible for me to join the public service in 2007. If I'd gone straight from the job that I couldn't do to the public service, I would have failed. So those controlled challenges are really important, and it's like building your resilience muscle. And the more you flex that muscle, the stronger it gets. And that can be applied in all sorts of different circumstances. And the third thing is failing successfully, but I think I'm going to talk a bit about that later. Some other qualities is viewing the child as different, not less. That's the basis of neurodiversity, if you've come across the neurodiversity movement. And it's the idea that everybody's brains are wired differently. And that's not necessarily a good or a bad thing, it's just a thing. And so neurodiversity is just that idea that we're all different, our brains are all different. And an autistic person has an autistic brain, which comes with its own strengths and challenges. But it is not necessarily a bad thing. So understanding that is a really good way of addressing some of those lacking of confidence that autistic people have. Having faith in their capability, knowing when to put the brakes on. So, and this depends on each person. Obviously, each individual is different, but if something is obviously causing stress, if you're putting in a controlled challenge and it's obviously causing major stress, don't be slavish to it, be flexible. And think, well, maybe not this time, maybe we can do that later. So knowing when to apply the brakes is really important. And you will know your child better than anyone else does as well as a parent. Not viewing resilience as them needing to toughen up. That take a teaspoon of cement and harden up. That's not resilience. That's unhelpful. And that can actually do more damage than good. The other one is not viewing it as victim blaming. I often have parents saying to me, they don't like resilience. And I say, why don't you like resilience? And they say, well, my kid was being bullied at school. So I went down to the school and the principal said, oh, your child wouldn't get bullied if they were more resilient. Well, that's true, but it's not really very helpful because you can't just acquire resilience overnight. And that's actually blaming the victim. In a bullying situation, the person whose behaviour needs to change is the bully, not the autistic child.
Yeah, very, very true. Well said. It's not really addressing the issue, but yeah. So building resilience. What does resilience look like for kids at this stage in their life?
It does make a difference, and it can make a noticeable difference. Things like growing self-confidence and growing self-esteem, the ability to persevere with something. So rather than going, this is too hard, I give up, to actually keep going with something. A sense of pride in who they are. I'm always talking about autistic pride. I've got a blog post actually called A Parent's Guide to Autistic Pride, which was very popular. And I think that sense of pride and positive self-knowledge is really key. And resilience will help build that. And it will help build resilience in turn. Liking themselves, that's really important. A lot of autistic kids don't like themselves. They've been told this negativity, bullying, deficits thinking, some of the kinds of therapies that people use are not very therapeutic. So they often don't like themselves at all. So if they're building resilience, they're more likely to like themselves. The capacity to communicate their needs more effectively, the increasing ability to take on challenges, because that's what it's all about. Resilience is about being able to take on challenges and difficulties. And if you can be resilient, then you can do that more, and that feeds into itself. And yes, given the example of Adam, who I gave before, was quite the opposite of that. He had a lack of resilience and a lack of being being able to have his own mastery over what he was doing. And resilience is a sense of mastery and control. I've just got a quote from the book, actually. So resilience is essentially the capacity to bounce back fairly quickly after a difficulty or an adverse experience. Resilience basically involves working through any challenges or difficulties encountered in a proactive manner that will enable you to build confidence and mastery in overcoming that difficulty. Through doing this, a person can build mastery and confidence in other areas of their life without even realising they're doing so.
That is very well said. Thank you for sharing that. I'm wondering, so listening and relating it to my experience with my son's journey and some of the young adults that I coach and some of the parents that I coach, I can feel this question coming up. Where do you begin if like you gave the example of your friend that you met that had really didn't have resilience, that really didn't believe in himself, where does one begin? I know that I didn't, I wasn't prepared to ask that, but I'm so curious. Can you help me with that?
I think I think it's one of those things where it's never too early or too late. I think if you've got a child who's 6, then put some of these strategies in place. That's fantastic. If you've got a child who's 26, also put some of these strategies in place, and that's going to help. So I never had this growing up, but I learned it, and I think we have a big focus on early intervention in the autism space. And if you don't get early intervention, you've lost your child. That kind of thing, really dramatic sort of thinking. But actually, I think in reality, it doesn't work like that. I know a number of people who are diagnosed as adults or as older children, and they manage okay with the right support. So I think we need to move away from this insistence that everything has to happen straight away, because I think a lot of parents feel that they haven't, they've done their child a disservice by not getting the diagnosis earlier or not getting interventions or anything like that. But actually it's different for each person. And I think with this stuff, it really is, you can learn it at any time. You could learn it at 60. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. And I think that's important for parents to know that it's never too late, and you can start building resilience and incorporating the confidence that our kids so desperately need. And navigating high school for my son was very difficult, for a lot of the things you said. Joseph also got bullied. So it's a tough time for any teenager. What are some of the issues that we need to be aware of, and how do we help our kids on the spectrum build the confidence navigating high school?
High school is a nightmare, absolutely, very challenging. I hated it. Most autistic people hate high school. Well, I can't say most, I don't know all the autistic people, but many autistic people hate high school. So yeah, issues like bullying, and that requires an ongoing dialogue on with the school, and also considering other education methods. Don't need to actually physically attend school. There's different options: distant education, correspondence, all of that, homeschooling, things like that. So school is just a nightmare, and if it's, because it can put children at risk as well. I mean, bullying causes suicidal thinking. You don't want your child to be at risk of that. So if you need to take them out of the school environment, that's actually okay. And also they can come back to education at a later time. It's not, once again, you don't have to do school in the traditional expected way. New people and social situations can be really challenging, and all the chaos of the schoolyard, can be absolutely overwhelming. So having a space for kids to go to where there's no people is really useful. Letting kids go in the library at lunchtime, that kind of thing. When I was at school, we weren't allowed in the library at lunchtime until we were in year 10. And, I wasn't very happy about that. So lunchtime clubs with adult supervision is often a really good thing. You get chess clubs or games clubs and stuff like that. So you've got a teacher in there. So there's not going to be bullying when there's a teacher in the room, because that's what happens is at lunchtime and recess, all the bullies come out and give you a hard time. So having a safe place to go to with adult supervision is really important. Sensory issues can be a big problem at school: lighting, noise, things like that. So working with the school to address these, and sometimes it's really hard to impress upon schools how important sensory accommodations are, because it can mean the difference between someone being able to be there and just be absolutely horrified and stressed. And learning styles. So there are different learning styles, and often autistic kids, especially if they have things like dyslexia and ADHD as well, which is very common that autistic kids have a few other neurodivergences, those learning methods can be really stressful for kids. So once again, working with teachers, sometimes teachers don't even realise there are different learning styles, and they just teach the way they teach. and the kids are missing out on actually getting good education. So I think those things are very important.
Yes, wonderful. Great, great, great advice. In the book, you offer some activities to support resilience and coping strategies for difficult situations. Would you share some of them with us?
The book's got a range of strategies for specific situations, such as managing issues at school, bullying, and managing failure. So each issue has information on practical steps parents can take to support their child through the issue and what it looks like if it's gone well. So one of the things in there was going to the school dance, um, riding the bus. I can't remember. I haven't actually got a copy of the book handy, so I sold them all. I had a few of them and everyone bought them. So, but no, there's lots of specific situations with strategies to support kids in those situations. Obviously, the control challenges and the place of safety are the more overarching elements of building resilience. Being supportive is really important, of course. One of the things that we used in quite a few of the topics was an open question session. And this is where kids are encouraged by their parents to ask any question they like about an element of life. And we suggested maybe making it a thing and putting like an invite and everything, and they can come along and ask the parents any question they like about starting school or whatever the topic is. And then the parents can work through it with them. And we find that's quite a helpful thing. Building their positive sense of identity and who they are is really important. Seeing the idea of teenage rebellion, and autistic kids tend to either be angels or devils. You either get absolutely angelic, perfect, beautiful teenagers who follow all the rules and don't do any rebellion, or you get people like me that joined the socialists and moved out of home when they were 17. You don't generally get much in between. But the good thing about teenage rebellion, and just remember this, parents, there is a good thing. The good thing is that it's actually a step towards independence. So when kids rebel, it's actually a really important part of their development, and it's about establishing their identity, understanding who they are independently of their parents. And while it's very stressful for parents to go through this, my dad will attest, it's actually can be seen as a really positive thing. And another important thing about autistic teens is to connect them with neurodivergent peers, that idea of the tribe. We get along a lot better with other autistic people because we understand each other. It's almost like a cultural difference. I always see, autistic people are speaking French and neurotypical people are speaking German. And the thing is, not only are they different languages, the neurotypical people don't recognize that French is a language. So they don't actually understand. So they think that the autistic people are speaking German very poorly. And that's that's one, I came up with that. That's my thing, the cultural model of autistic.
I love that. That is something that's a beautiful metaphor, because I think we can all relate to that.
Yeah.
And I know that as a parent, I need to learn how to speak German very well so that I can speak to my son. Right?
Absolutely. And you can, and if you get a good ally, they can translate for you, So
Yeah.
it's a good thing. But no, that being connected with other neurodivergent people is usually a very good thing for autistic folks.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love that metaphor you gave. As they enter the stage of young adulthood, which again, this is a difficult time for anyone, what are some of the most important things to remember to help guide them?
Building a sense of pride in who they are is really key, and that takes you through life. That's a big positive. Body autonomy and self-protection, incredibly important, and that's true for teens as well. Autistic people do get taken advantage of, which is not okay. Social connection, so autistic peer group, that kind of thing. Supporting their social interactions as well. and building their capacity to take on new things and challenges. It's quite difficult, those transition points. So you've got high school to further education, to moving out of home, to getting a job. These are all big things. And for autistic people, they can be pretty overwhelming. So being aware that those things can be really stressful and giving support at those transition points, and also not making it all or nothing. If they can't actually do something at one point, that's okay. They can try it again later. So yeah, but just being aware of those transition points is really important.
Yeah. What is a good way to encourage somebody who's in that transition stage that really doesn't know what they want to do?
I think working through it with them and seeing what their interests are and what their passions are, and seeing if there's something they can do in the space of their interests and passions, I think is really important.
Yeah, great. That's great advice, to concentrate maybe on what am I passionate about, not really what am I going to do, but what do I love? Which brings me to this. You have a chapter called Falling Successfully, which I love. Would you talk about that?
So failure happens for everyone. It is inevitable that there will be failure and mistakes and things like that. We learn from our mistakes. We don't like making them. Nobody's keen on making mistakes, but we learn from them. And seeing failure as a learning opportunity rather than a disaster is really useful. Autistic people can really struggle with failing. It can be a big issue for us. So it's really important to change that narrative around failure to make it more a learning opportunity than a negative. And resilience can be seen as the opposite of fear of failure. Resilience is about making use of failure to build strength and to build capability.
Oh, that's powerful. I love that. I love that. As you mention in the book, many autistic adults struggle with independence and employment. How can we help them live a happy, fulfilling life?
Employers across the board need to understand autism better. We're in a situation where we've got highly talented autistic people who would be an asset to their employer that don't get the opportunity to go to work. So that needs to change. I would encourage young adults to do things a little outside their comfort zone if possible, and just do that, in an incremental manner. Accessing appropriate services, so employment service providers, education, things like that. Support understanding around gender and sexuality, because autistic people are considerably more likely to be gender divergent and transgender than the rest of the population. And a lot of us are queer in terms of sexuality as well. So people that are gay, lesbian, bi, pan, asexual, things like that. So being aware of that. Connecting with the autistic peer group, I keep coming back to that, don't I? And accessing mental health support if required. And educating the mental health services as much as possible too, because sometimes they need that.
Great advice. Yes. So all these things that you mention in the book, it sounds like if you haven't gotten any of these books, any parents listening out there, teachers, anybody in the community that wants to support the autistic community needs to go out and buy these books because they've got the how to walk you through that. Would you say that's true?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we need to go out and buy your books.
Absolutely, buy all of them. No, I remember a few years ago, I thought I would have arrived in life. I would have to do nothing more if somewhere in the world someone said, "Oh, I need to know some information about this topic. Oh, I'll just consult Yenn." And that happens all the time now. So I need to find a new goal to achieve to make sure I've made it. But I know people love my books. I also do a daily meme on social media, and people love those too.
Oh, my son loves memes. Um, what is your advice for moms raising kids with autism?
Have you got an hour?
I have as much time as you want.
I think the key thing is to have that neurodiversity lens. I see them as different, not less. Read, view content written, created by autistic people. If you want to understand autistic people, listen to autistic people, and that will help you. Connect them connect your kids with their neurodivergent peers. Don't view autism as a disaster or a curse. Autism comes with many strengths, and most autistic people that I know view autism as an integral part of who we are. That's why we say autistic, not person with autism, because it's actually a core part of our being. And so if you're looking at autism and say, oh, I kicked autism's butt, well, actually you're kicking your child's butt. So it's really important to see it in those terms, to my mind. Listen to your child, that's really important. Be an ally. An ally is somebody who stands beside someone, speaks on behalf of them when they can't speak on behalf of themselves. It's a respectful position. It's a position that's about not being all about them, but actually being a conduit for that child to communicate and be heard. So that's a really important thing. And encourage your child to ask questions. You might get lots of them though, because autistic people do like to ask questions.
Yes, and I love that though, because what I'm sitting here thinking about as you're speaking is, oh, I wish I would have had you in my life sooner. When Joseph was smaller, the amount of wisdom and the ability to change and shift this to a positive is so important, I think, for moms and any parent that is raising a child with autism, that it isn't the end of the world. It's beautiful. It's just different. Yeah, yeah. I wish I would have known you when Joseph was little. Or someone like you. You're beautiful. Is there anything that you would like to mention before we go?
Yes. So firstly, and this might go without saying, but all autistic people are different. There's a saying, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. And then someone turned it into a funny meme which said, if you've met one autistic person, then meet some more of us because we're awesome. I quite like that.
I love that.
So it's much better to take a strengths view than deficits one. And avoid those conversion type therapies that punish kids for being autistic. We avoid those in the advocacy world because they're not helpful and they actually can be very damaging. So keep away from those.
Do you have any off the top of your head that you would mention as we're talking about? Yeah. I wondered because I think it's important, this podcast in particular is all about educating and offering hope and inspiration. And I think that if there's something that parents need to know, I think it's important and I love that you're sharing all of this with us.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's really nice to talk to you.
Oh, I love it. I could actually I would love to speak to you for hours because I know that I have so much to learn from you. And I would like to give you this opportunity because I know that anybody who's listening to this is going to want to know, where can people go to find out more about your work and connect with you?
I have a website, which is www.yennpurkis.com. So that's YENNPURKIS.com. And that's got links to all my books. It's got some of my presentations and media. And it's got a links page, which has a bunch of really useful resources around autism that I've used. And yeah, check it out. Quite happy to have you have a look at all my various things. The books are good. You'll like the books. And yeah, check out the Parents' Practical Guide to Resilience for preteens and teens on the autism spectrum.
Thank you so much for doing this work. As you said earlier, there's a lot of information for early intervention, but I think the teenage years and the young adult years can be the most challenging. At least it was for me. It's how to navigate my beautiful son and offer him the inspiration that he needed, the confidence he needed, but also being the parent when he wasn't doing the things that he needed to do. And so having these books and the guidance that you offer us is invaluable. So thank you from the bottom of all of my heart for doing the work that you do to be the inspiration that we need. And I would love to have you back
Oh,
on Mother's Guide.
feel free. I'm definitely up for it. Nice early morning, early start to the day. Do a podcast. It's great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you.